Everyone laughed when the IT engineer Ethan paid only $1 for the tiniest house in the entire suburb. They saw a man who had failed stuck in a moldy shack. But Ethan saw a challenge, a strange deactivated digital panel hidden in the foundation, a lock designed not for a key but for code. He connected his powerful laptop to the ancient mechanism, his heart pounding as he typed the final sequence. Then, the walls of the tiny house began to move, folding away to reveal an illuminated vast space that defied all logic, promising a life of peace and power he never imagined. What impossible treasure did Ethan unlock for just $1? Watch to find out. Subscribe to support our mission of sharing stories of hidden value. Like this video and tell us in the comments, what is the greatest bargain you've ever found? The noise was relentless. It was not the simple roar of a highway or the steady pulse of construction. It was a layered symphony of urban decay. Above the persistent drone of traffic, the aggressive syncopation of a neighbor's music, and the constant hum of the shared building air conditioning, Ethan could hear the high-pitched whine of his own frustration. He ran a hand through his short-cropped blonde hair, leaning back slightly in his ergonomic chair. The chair itself, along with his dual 49-inch monitors, was the most luxurious item in his tiny studio apartment. The space was a paradox, a world-class IT engineer 40 years old, managing complex global networks from a corner of a room barely large enough to house a queen-sized bed. Ethan worked for a major tech firm remotely troubleshooting systems that spanned 3 continents. The work was demanding, often requiring 18-hour stretches, fueled by instant coffee and adrenaline. Yet despite his professional success, his living reality remained stubbornly mediocre. He had moved to the city in 2012 chasing opportunity, but all he had truly caught was stress and high rent. His office was defined by a thin line of painter's tape stuck to the cheap wooden floor, separating his professional zone from his kitchenette. Beyond the single grime-streaked window, there was nothing but the brutal geometry of other identical apartment buildings, concrete steel, and reflections of the unforgiving sun. He remembered a time when he lived closer to the ocean, or when his childhood bedroom overlooked a real lawn. Now, his only connection to the living world was a struggling basil plant he kept on a shelf, desperately trying to survive the lack of light. Another firewall breach in Singapore, Ethan muttered, pulling himself back into the digital matrix. His mind was sharp, quick, adept at solving complex, invisible problems. But lately, he felt his physical self was dissolving, suffocated by the very air he breathed. The noise, the lack of space, the constant reminder that every inch of his existence was rented, borrowed, and subject to renewal terms, it was grinding him down. He desperately needed space, not necessarily luxury, but space to breathe, to think, and crucially space to hear nothing but the wind or the distant sound of moving water. He needed earth beneath his feet, not asphalt. He had spent the last 3 years obsessively searching real estate listings, only to slam his laptop shut in defeat. Everything within a sane commuting distance was either prohibitively expensive or offered the same cramped concrete misery he already endured. It was during a mandatory half-hour break sometime in late 2024 that the anomaly appeared. Instead of checking email, Ethan was scrolling through Sustainable Futures, a non-profit architectural preservation website he frequented purely for daydreaming. Most listings showcased beautiful, expensive eco-homes far out of his price range. Then he saw it. The image was grainy, showing a small, weathered structure in the style of an old utility house nestled amongst thick, unkempt foliage. The listing was titled, "The Trust Project Modest Dwelling and Ecosystem." He clicked, expecting an obvious catch. The location was an hour and a half outside the city, a distance that was manageable. He scanned the details, his heart beginning a cautious thud against his ribs. The description was peculiar, focusing more on the land than the building. Established biodiverse lot. Home to multiple native species, requires commitment to conservation. Then he saw the price. $1. Ethan blinked, reloaded the page, and stared at the bold numerical fact. It was not a typo. The legal disclaimer below the price was dense, written in the unforgiving language of endowments and trusts. It explained that the property was being offered for the symbolic price of $1 as part of a legacy project established by the original architect. The conditions were not optional. They were contractual and absolute. They were the real price of the home. He read the two main clauses repeatedly, memorizing the severity of the commitment. 1. Maintain the architectural integrity of the structure on the premises, preventing any external modification or expansion. 2. Preserve the site's ecosystem in its current biodiverse state, dedicating resources to its conservation and protection. It was not a house for someone looking to flip property or tear down and rebuild. It was a home for a caretaker, a warden of nature. The trust was essentially giving away the house to the person who could prove they valued the land and the original vision more than profit or superficial size. The entire concept was wildly improbable, yet it resonated deeply with the desperate yearning in Ethan's core. It was the only affordable pathway to ownership he had ever seen. He filled out the extensive pre-application form detailing his background, his passion for nature, citing the sad basil plant, and his technical abilities, sending it off with a mixture of disbelief and frantic hope. A week later, a reply arrived. He was scheduled for a property visit. The day of the visit was a Saturday, one of the first times Ethan had felt truly motivated in months. The drive took him far from the high-rises past strip malls and finally onto quiet, tree-lined suburban streets. The neighborhood was ordinary, comprised mostly of two-story homes built in the 1980s. The house itself stood out, but not in a good way. It was significantly smaller than its neighbors, a single-story box that looked forgotten. The paint was peeling, and the roof had a noticeable sag. Yet, as Ethan stepped onto the lot, the first thing that hit him was the air. It was clean-smelling of damp earth and pine. The land was thick with native growth clumps of wildflowers, tall grasses, and mature trees that formed a dense, welcoming canopy. He heard the unmistakable chirping of wrens and the frantic scuttling of a squirrel, sounds he had not truly registered in years. This was not a manicured lawn. It was a small, thriving natural refuge. Standing there dwarfed by the towering trees and the silence, Ethan realized the house was exactly what he needed, even with its defects. The small, shabby building was irrelevant. The true value was the living, breathing ecosystem around it. He met the trust representative, a quiet woman who spoke little but emphasized the severity of the conservation clauses. She watched him intently, measuring his reaction not to the peeling paint, but to the wild beauty of the garden. "The trust is not looking for a contractor, Mr. Keller," she stated plainly. "We are looking for a custodian. If you violate the integrity of the architecture or fail to protect the land, the property reverts immediately to the trust. Do you understand the scope of this commitment?" Ethan looked at the tiny house, then at the vast green canopy above. He thought of the constant soul-crushing noise of the city, the painter's tape marking his life, and the struggling basil plant. This was not just a home. It was a chance to reclaim his peace. "I understand," Ethan confirmed, his voice steady. "I accept the conditions completely." He reached into his wallet, pulled out a crisp $1 bill, and handed it over. For the first time in over a decade, Ethan felt the grounding sensation of owning something real, something that demanded responsibility, not just rent. He walked away with the keys, a single, unassuming man who had just traded $1 for the promise of a truly meaningful life. The move was quick, efficient, and thoroughly depressing in its simplicity. Ethan possessed little more than his professional gear, the heavy monitors, tower computers, network switches, and a small collection of clothes and books. After years of urban renting, he was accustomed to keeping his life mobile and minimized. Yet seeing his entire existence contained within the small peeling shell of the dollar house was humbling. The neighbors watched. They didn't watch with the aggressive curiosity of city dwellers, but with the measured, almost pitying skepticism typical of long-term suburban residents. The house was already notorious. A single-story structure obviously neglected for years, sitting in a quiet neighborhood of families who took pride in their perfectly manicured lawns and regularly washed SUVs. Ethan felt their judgment like a tangible presence every time he stepped outside to haul a box or wrestle with the stiff front door lock. Henderson from across the street, a retired schoolteacher, known for her detailed knowledge of local tax liens, approached him one afternoon while he was trying to clean the dust from the sole window. "Good afternoon, Mr. Keller," she said, her voice dripping with an invasive politeness. "I just wanted to welcome you, though. I must admit we were all quite surprised to see the sale go through." "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. I'm happy to be here." "Yes, well, it's certainly rustic. We were just wondering if you had checked with the building department regarding the foundation. We hear there's a rather complicated history with this particular lot." She was fishing for drama for confirmation that the $1 price tag was a mask for catastrophic debt or structural failure. Ethan offered her a bland, non-committal smile. "Everything is filed correctly with the trust, ma'am. I'm just focusing on preservation right now." The interaction was typical. The neighbors, the retired couple next door, the young family down the street didn't accuse him of anything specific. They simply let their disbelief hang in the air, assuming Ethan was either financially ruined, running some sort of commune, or had completely mismanaged his life to end up in the shack on Hemlock Lane. Inside the house, the true challenges began. The above-ground space was charitably insufficient. Ethan managed to squeeze his desk and two large monitors against the longest wall, dedicating about 60% of the single room to his professional hub. The poor acoustics meant every time a car passed or a dog barked, the sound echoed right back into his microphone during conference calls. There was no separation, no escape. His work was demanding enough without the added stress of constantly apologizing for the suburban nosebleed. He tried noise-canceling headphones, but the constant feeling of being physically constricted was suffocating. He realized his escape from the city's noise had merely replaced it with a different, quieter, but equally stressful form of confinement. The contract's strict clause forbidding any external modification or expansion loomed large. He couldn't even add a small shed for his equipment. "This won't work long term," Ethan murmured one afternoon, rubbing his temples after an important call with the Beijing office had been interrupted by a lawnmower outside. "I need a sanctuary. I need isolation." His profession demanded absolute reliability, and that meant a perfect network connection. The old shared internet line to the house was erratic, dropping signals, frequently an existential threat to his livelihood. Ethan knew the solution he needed to run a dedicated fiber optic line. The neighborhood recently installed new infrastructure, but hooking into it required extensive internal wiring grounding and integrating with the house's existing ancient utility hookups. This necessity, the non-negotiable requirement of his high-tech career, became the ultimate driver for his deeper exploration of the house's structure. He began tracing the existing wiring and piping that fed into the house. The mains junction was located in a cramped, dark corner of the main room, partially concealed by a section of loose paneling. Working with a powerful flashlight, Ethan meticulously checked the conduits. The plumbing was corroded, and the electrical box looked like something pulled from a building built in 1950. As he was trying to snake a flexible wiring guide near the floor, his hand brushed against something unusual. It wasn't wood rust or cobwebs. It felt like cool, smooth plastic, recessed just slightly behind the old plywood sheeting. Curiosity overriding caution, Ethan removed the plywood section. Behind it, deeply set into the concrete foundation, was an interface he instantly recognized as being far too advanced for a house of this age. It was a sleek matte black plate housing what looked like a sophisticated deactivated digital control panel. There were no obvious buttons or switches, only a dense matrix of pin connectors and a faint, almost invisible etching resembling a keypad layout. The mechanism was silent, covered in a fine layer of concrete dust, but it was pristine beneath. Ethan felt a jolt of pure professional intrigue. This was not an old alarm system or a fancy intercom. The configuration of the connectors hinted at a dedicated high-power communication or environmental control unit. He checked the house documents, scanned the blueprints he received from the trust. Nothing. No mention of a hidden control center, certainly nothing digital. The blueprints depicted the single-room structure he was currently standing in, and that was all. This discovery changed everything. The structure wasn't simply old and cheap. It contained a deliberate technical secret. A simple latch or lever would suggest a hidden closet, but this required knowledge, a passcode, an access key, or specialized hardware. Ethan set up a separate folding table, covering it with oscilloscopes, voltmeters, and a small dedicated diagnostic laptop. The IT engineer side of his brain, usually focused on global packet routing, was now hyper-focused on a local physical problem. This was a riddle designed specifically for someone like him. He carefully examined the plate, mapping the pinouts. It was clearly designed to receive power and data input. The very existence of this technology refuted the appearance of the house and contradicted the simple nature of the surrounding neighborhood. Ethan realized with a slow building excitement, this was the true challenge of the Dollar House. The structure was not just structurally unsound or aesthetically simple. It was a sealed vault, and the only way to open it was not with physical force, but with technical skill. He spent the rest of the evening tracing faint wires that led away from the panel and into the foundation beneath the house, feeling a rush of purpose he hadn't experienced since his first successful hackathon in college back in 2008. The neighbors might have thought he was a fool, but they had no idea that beneath the peeling paint lay a complex technological puzzle waiting for its master. For 3 consecutive nights, Ethan devoted himself entirely to the matte black control plate. He taped off his workspace, shielding his diagnostic equipment from the dust and the prying eyes of the windows. This was no longer just about fixing a slow internet connection. It was a deeply personal professional challenge. He felt the original architect, or whoever designed this technological anomaly, speaking directly to him, demanding not brute force, but calculated ingenuity. He began by meticulously photographing the pin array, mapping its connections. The interface was proprietary and archaic, but the core design principles were sound. It was clearly designed to be fail-safe, prioritizing security and stability over speed of access. "You didn't want anyone just stumbling onto this, did you?" Ethan murmured to the silent wall. Using his multimeter, he safely introduced a low-voltage current to the main power conduit. The control plate remained dark. The system required more than just power. It needed a key. Analyzing the faint keypad etching on the surface, Ethan deduced the likely sequence protocol. It wasn't a standard 4-digit code. It was a long, complex sequence, more like a seed phrase or a date. He cross-referenced the property's recorded history with architectural society records and conservation trust documents. He tried construction dates of key ecological reports for the area, and even the KTS's known birth and death years. Nothing worked. Finally, relying purely on his knowledge of vintage industrial control systems, Ethan realized the panel might be awaiting a simple non-numeric diagnostic command. He wired his laptop to the input ports, bypassing the keypad interface entirely, and initiated a secure, low-level reset signal. For a long, agonizing moment, the room remained silent, broken only by the hum of Ethan's computer fan. Then, the black plate gave a sharp, almost musical ping. Faint geometric lines of emerald green light traced themselves across the control plate, followed by a soft, confirming tone. The system was online. Ethan quickly input a diagnostic query, and the plate flashed a single cryptic text string, "Welcome home, access granted." Before he could process the message, the air pressure in the room shifted. A seam along the concrete floor, which Ethan had dismissed as a crack, widened. The section of the wall where the panel was mounted began to retract inward with a smooth hydraulic hiss, followed by the floor dropping slightly and folding away. It was a flawless piece of engineering. In the space where the wall had been a sturdy spiral staircase, descended into absolute darkness. Ethan grabbed his powerful LED flashlight, his heart thumping not with fear but exhilaration. He had been right. The house was a vault, and his specialized skills had been the key. He started his descent. The air immediately grew cooler and drier. The staircase was crafted from heavy-gauge steel, utterly solid and silent beneath his weight. After perhaps 20 feet, the staircase opened into an unexpectedly vast space. Ethan shone his light around, stepping into the first subterranean level. It was not a crawl space or a utility room. It was a dedicated, expansive working environment. This was the ideal IT studio. The room was shaped like a broad rectangle large enough to contain 3 times the equipment Ethan owned. The walls were clad in thick, sound-dampening acoustic panels, eliminating any echo. A specialized air filtration system ensured the environment was pristine. Along one wall, sleek built-in shelving was designed for server racks, and network conduits were terminated cleanly and clearly ready for high-speed fiber connection. Ethan walked slowly, his boots muffled by the thick industrial carpet tiles. He immediately identified the purpose of the space-complete technological isolation. No noise-perfect climate control for electronics and absolute focus. This room was a professional sanctuary designed by someone who understood the demands of complex remote work. It was the antithesis of his cramped city corner. He sat in the center of the room, feeling an immense wave of relief wash over him. His struggles with noise space and focus all instantly solved. But the exploration wasn't over. Near the back of the studio, another reinforced door, clearly marked with biohazard and environmental controls, stood partially ajar. Ethan pushed it open. The next chamber was breathtaking. It was the subterranean eco-room, a living, thriving greenhouse and conservatory. The air here was humid, rich with the smell of fertile earth mold and chlorophyll. The ceiling was lined with a complex array of specialized LED grow lights, providing a gentle full-spectrum light that nurtured plants in tiered beds. In the center, a small enclosed aquatic environment housed fish and amphibious life integrated into a closed-loop hydroponic and aquaponic system. This room was the practical implementation of the conservation clause. It was a biological laboratory sustaining life independently. Ethan saw the complex machinery that ran the off-grid system, huge battery banks, water recyclers, and air exchange mechanisms. The entire house was designed to be self-sufficient and hidden, protecting the ecosystem both above and below. Overwhelmed, Ethan sank onto a wooden bench near a cluster of large-leafed ferns. This house wasn't just solving his professional problem, it was fulfilling his deepest need for connection with nature. Near the bench, tucked into a wall recess, he found a small, heavy, leather-bound journal. It was the KTS's design log. Ethan carefully opened it. The pages were filled with detailed schematics and elegant handwriting. The journal confirmed the architect's philosophy: prioritize nature by ingeniously hiding modern convenience underground. The KTS wrote of being mocked by investors in the late 1990s and early 2000s, who insisted clients wanted size and visible luxury, not hidden efficiency and conservation. This single house was the prototype, built and sealed in 2005, designed to wait for the one person who valued the philosophical commitment more than the superficial size. Ethan flipped to the final entry, dated 2006. The KTS wrote, "The key is not money, but understanding. If the new owner seeks the technical heart of this dwelling, they prove they possess the intelligence and dedication to protect its soul." The contract says, "Maintain the architectural integrity." That integrity is hidden. I leave it to the engineer or the custodian to prove their worth by finding the true home. Tears blurred Ethan's vision. He hadn't just bought a house. He had inherited a mission: the trust, the $1 price, the rigorous conditions. It was all a brilliant, complex screening mechanism. The structure above ground was the simple, defenseless facade that repelled opportunists. The system was designed to only yield its secrets to someone with the specific knowledge and commitment, the very things Ethan possessed. He closed the journal. The noise of the city, the snickering of the neighbors, it all felt distant, irrelevant. Ethan knew he had not violated the clause to maintain architectural integrity. He had in fact completed the original architect's vision. He had earned his home. The rhythms of Ethan's new life were a carefully crafted duality, a perfect balance between the organic and the digital. His days were now marked not by the shrieking sirens of the city, but by the gentle whir of the subterranean air filters and the quiet chirp of the wrens above ground. He settled into a routine that nourished his spirit. Below ground in the soundproof sanctuary of the ideal IT studio, he was the master of his domain. His complex server racks ran silently, the climate control perfect for both the electronics and his own concentration. He could handle global crises for his company without hearing a single bark from the neighbor's dog or the rustle of leaves outside. The efficiency and tranquility allowed him to cut his working hours down significantly, trading 18-hour panicked shifts for 8 hours of focused productivity. Once his professional duties were complete, he ascended to the eco-room in the surface. In the humid, warm glow of the greenhouse, he tended the terrariums, nurturing the soil and the plants that fed the independent ecosystem. Above, he cared for the wild garden, carefully removing invasive weeds and ensuring the native species flourished just as the trust mandated. The simple act of sinking his hands into the earth was more therapeutic than any vacation he had ever taken. The basil plant, once struggling in the city smog, now sat on his desk in the studio, a vibrant green totem of his liberation. Ethan's appearance transformed. The permanent crease of stress between his brows smoothed out. His shoulders, perpetually hunched in the city, straightened. He was still the same man, but his internal value, his peace, his purpose, was now reflected in his outward calm. The neighbors, however, remained skeptical. They saw the same small, slightly shabby house, yet they noticed the subtle, confusing changes. Ethan never seemed to leave the house, yet his work clothes were always pristine. They saw him meticulously tending the untidy wild garden rather than installing a nice, respectable lawn. Their whispered jokes. He must be running a weird cult, or maybe he's just hoarding persisted, though they now carried a slightly nervous edge. Ethan merely offered a polite nod, his secret too beautiful to share with casual judgment. The peace was shattered late one Saturday afternoon in the autumn of 2025. The weather forecast had been grim, predicting a rare, severe tropical storm that rolled in from the coast. By 3 o'clock, the sky had turned a sickly, bruised purple, and the rain was falling with punishing force. Then came the lightning strike, a sharp, blinding flash, followed by a thunderclap that rattled the entire suburb. The power went out instantly. The silence was unnerving, soon replaced by the desperate cries of car alarms and the distant rumble of generators sputtering to life. Ethan, deep in the IT studio, felt only a brief flicker as the mains power failed, immediately replaced by the steady, smooth surge of the off-grid system. The internal studio lights didn't even dim. The architect's design was flawless. However, the storm was severe, and Ethan knew that the external solar arrays and the complex air exchange vents, vital for the survival of the eco-room, needed immediate manual inspection. The storm was flooding the neighborhood, threatening to overwhelm the ground-level inputs. He had to access the primary junction located near the staircase mechanism. He ascended the spiral staircase, moving quickly through the small dark room above. He reached the wall panel and engaged the digital interface, inputting the diagnostic sequence. The wall began its silent hydraulic movement, folding away to expose the staircase and the control junction behind it. At that exact moment, a frantic pounding erupted at the front door. "Ethan, Mr. Keller," a voice shouted. It was Mr. Davies, the older man who lived 2 houses down, normally a taciturn man who had always viewed Ethan with a mixture of pity and confusion. "Are you all right? Your roof looks like it's taking on water." "I brought an old battery lantern Ethan knew he couldn't stall. The eco-room's ventilation needed inspection immediately. He pulled the door open just enough. "Mr. Davies, thank you, but I'm fine. My power's still." Before Ethan could finish, a powerful gust of wind ripped the front door from his grasp, slamming it against the internal wall. Mr. Davies stumbled inside, soaking wet, his eyes wide with concern and then freezing in absolute astonishment. The sight before him defied all logic. The back wall of the tiny house was gone. From the gaping hole where the staircase descended, a broad, warm cone of sophisticated clean light spilled out, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the humid air. The light was not the dim yellow of a basement. It was the vibrant, full-spectrum glow of an advanced laboratory. From the depths, Mr. Davies could faintly hear a steady engineered hum, the sound of complex machinery running seamlessly. The neighbor's mouth fell open. He saw the sheer impossible size of the revealed space. Realizing the tiny shack was merely a facade, he took a staggering step back, dropping the battery lantern. "What is this?" Mr. Davies whispered, his voice trembling, not from cold, but from sheer disbelief. This is vast. This is impossible." The decades of mockery, the assumption of failure, evaporated in that instant of brilliant, clean, hidden light. The revelation spread through the neighborhood faster than the storm itself. Within 48 hours, the story reached the ears of the original KTS's trust. They had maintained complete radio silence for 20 years, allowing the structure to wait patiently. Now they reacted immediately. A week later, a small delegation from the trust arrived, led by the same quiet woman who had handled the $1 sale. They did not come with lawyers or eviction notices. They came with quiet reverence. They toured the IT studio, nodding approvingly at the clean connections and the purposeful utilization of the space. They spent an hour in the eco room, marveling at the thriving ecosystem Ethan had helped stabilize. Finally, they sat with Ethan in the modest room above ground. "When you bought this house, Mr. Keller, we knew you might discover the secret," the lead representative said, her eyes shining with emotion. "But we never knew if the new owner would use their discovery for personal gain, or if they would destroy the integrity by trying to monetize the land above ground." She paused, then continued, her voice gentle but firm. "By activating the control system, which was designed to be inaccessible to anyone without significant technical insight, and by immediately prioritizing the protection of the off-grid systems during the storm, you have proven something crucial. You fulfilled the spirit of the contract. You didn't just maintain the architectural integrity of the structure, you proved its function. The trust confirmed that Ethan was the ideal preservationist, the rightful heir to the KTS's vision." The mocking voices of the neighbors faded into distant echoes. They no longer saw a failed man in a shack. They saw the custodian of a technological marvel, a man who had recognized value where they had only seen a liability. Ethan embraced his role not just as an owner, but as the guardian of the legacy. He began planning workshops, using his home as a discrete model for young architects and conservationists, demonstrating that sustainable, meaningful living does not require enormous wealth or size. Standing on his front porch one afternoon, watching the repaired garden thrive, Ethan smiled. The true value was not in the property line or the square footage. It was in the integrity of the design, the peace it brought him, and the lesson it held for the world, that value is internal, not superficial. He had traded $1 for the discovery of a profound technological soul. And so the story of the Dollar House teaches us that the greatest treasures are often hidden, not in plain sight, but within a commitment to integrity and a refusal to judge by appearances. Ethan didn't find wealth, he found peace, proving that true value lies in the depth of a vision and the quiet courage to protect it. If Ethan's journey to find his true home resonates with your own search for balance and belonging, please let us know by sharing your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us tell more touching tales of discovery and devotion. Subscribe to join our community, and if you're ready for another shocking story, click on the video now appearing on your screen.